All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Box podcast. Oh my gosh, it's been a hot minute since I've recorded one of these. So I'm really excited today to be joined by somebody that is not new to the industry, that might be very familiar to a lot of people who are listening or watching in on this. Welcome today, Mr. Eric Bryant.
From Southern California.
Excellent. It's a lot warmer there today than it is here in Canada. I can almost guarantee that.
I can almost guarantee, even though it is kind of chilly here, it's like 67 degrees, and pretty much everybody in this town is wearing a parka and boots when it gets this cold.
I was just going to say, that's pretty cold here. I think I'm at about 40. I'm doing the quick conversion in my head. I'm at about 43 degrees. So you're still doing better than we are. That's for sure.
Yeah, we normally are.
All right. So it's so great to have you here, Eric. And, I'm excited about this for a couple of reasons. As our listeners know, we love to have conversations with folks in the industry that have had experience or a perspective from that intersection of real estate, technology, and capital. And I'm excited for two reasons. Number one, I can't think of somebody that's had as much experience at that intersection maybe as you have, and in a few different
who's really
ways.
Old.
I didn't say that. It's
Okay.
Experience, Eric. It's experience.
Okay.
And also, we get the pleasure of working with you as part of the Reach Canada 2022 cohort. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that as well. So let's just start there. Let's start with sort of your story, who you are, where you've come from, and what your latest and greatest gig is.
Well, I come from a small town in Massachusetts. No, I've been in this crazy industry probably 25 plus years. It all started on just a strange, happenstance. I was divorced at a young age. I had three kids, 7, 5, and 1.5 at the time. And I was having to decide how to raise them in an area that was going to be conducive to a good, to a good result. And I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and I didn't think I could do it there. There wasn't going to be any way. And at the time, I was a national accounts manager for Pacific Bell at that time, now AT&T, and they were not able to allow me to transfer out of the Bay Area. And so I had to make a decision what I was going to do. And I decided to take the kids and go to the Central Valley of California. If you're not familiar with that, it's farmland in the center of California, and just a bunch of good old boys and girls, and lots of space and a whole different atmosphere from the craziness that is the Bay Area. So that's what I did. Took the kids, went there, and didn't have a job. So I had to figure out what to do. And there was a small company for sale. It was called Flyers for You. This is no joke. Flyers for You. And they had 350 customers, and they were all real estate agents. So they were basically producing flyers and just listed cards and all that kind of stuff for real estate agents in the Central Valley. And they wanted out. So I said, I'll take it. And I bought the company, ended up changing it to Take One digital imaging, and changing it to a more of a focus on forward-thinking technology rather than just getting your stuff printed. That turned into a gig with a local prudential brokerage that had 15 offices that needed someone to train the agents on new technologies as they were coming at them. And this was right about when IDX websites started to come in, and
Yeah.
Back in the social media days, the beginning of Twitter and Facebook and things of that nature. So they were overwhelmed with being able to train their agents on it. And so I jumped into that. And pretty soon I got really good at it and started to get into that tech side of things, turned it into a consulting company that lasted about 18 years, up until just very recently when I went to work for First American Data, and saw that side of the equation. And now I'm with this incredibly cool company called Openn, and I've been around a long time. We just talked about all the things that I've done. I haven't had this much fun
That
forever,
is so
ever
cool.
since I first started doing flyers for you and trying to figure out what I was going to do for a living.
That I love that story, and I like the sort of, because I think so many of us, right? I was in the same boat, kind of found my way into this industry. It wasn't really intentional, and it wasn't planned, and it wasn't purposeful. I just sort of found myself here, and I too am having probably more fun than I've had, in any career, in any role, including any previous role that I've had in this space. And so let me hear about a little bit more about Openn and what you guys are doing and why you're having so much fun.
Yeah, so this is another great story because, as I said, I was at First American Data. Openn was a customer. We were going to provide them with data. We were actually a sponsor of the NAR Reach program, and as part of that sponsorship, the participants got data from us while they were in the cohort at no cost. So I got this wonderful opportunity to meet all these fantastic emerging technology companies. One of them was Openn, and they were a company out of Australia. They were in the Australian cohort. They were a publicly traded company because they had gone onto done an IPO in the Australian Stock Exchange and raised some money and wanted to expand to North America with that raise. So, in hearing their story and understanding their company, there was just a natural transition in the conversation to, hey, do you know anybody who we can count on to get the word out to North America about this great product? And, I started to look around because I know a lot of people in the industry. I couldn't find anybody better than me to do it. So the conversation shifted to what does it look like if I'm that person that becomes the director of operations for this company? And 2 months later, I was the director of operations for Openn. And so a little bit more about Openn. Again, they're from Australia, publicly traded. They have a product, we're going to call it an offer management product. It doesn't really have an official name at this point, and it's one of those rare pieces of the real estate transaction that had not been automated until very recently. For years and years, the offer and acceptance portion of the transaction, which is where the negotiations take place, right? Put in an offer, go back and forth, handling multiple offers, all that kind of stuff that the agents have to do. That had been done by FedEx and fax and email attachments and PDFs and dropping off, at the front desk kind of stuff. And it was a real gap. I mean, if we're trying to achieve a technology a technology solution from end to end, we had a break in the pie right there. So that was one of the reasons for it. But it was started by two real estate agents and a venture capitalist in Australia. And the real estate agents realized that there was some serious issues going on as far as missing that piece of the technology. And then really it had to do with the transparency issue. One of the things that they struggle with in Australia, and we're struggling with too in North America, both Canada and the United States, is this acceptance of transparency in the offer and acceptance process. For years, there's been this cloak and dagger kind of thing where, it was kept behind, screens and behind in back rooms, and you whispered and didn't talk about what the offers were in the process. But the consumers getting really, really just fed up with that. And I can tell you from a personal perspective, my daughter and her husband had to go through this exact problem when it comes to the offer and acceptance portion. It was like, we didn't get the house. Well, why? We don't know. They didn't accept our offer. Well, what was the offer? We don't know. So this frustration that consumers have had, especially on the buy side, around, if I'd only known, I would have offered more, right? That kind of thing is what drove this concept for these two guys that were real estate agents. They were forward thinking enough to say, you know what? The consumer deserves the transparency. They're asking for the transparency. We need to give it to them. So Openn was born. It's literally an opportunity for someone to imagine a make an offer button on a website when you're looking for homes, where you could actually click the button, be pulled into a system with all of the information for that home coming with it, and be able to say, I would like to make an offer on this home, and then have that completely managed by software, especially in a multiple offer situation. Because I don't care how good you are, and there's some excellent real estate agents, but there's also some rookies that don't quite have that skill set yet. There's no way they can properly manage 5, 6, 10 offers on a home and be able to get that information to the seller in the proper fashion under the guides or the guidelines set out by the National Association of Realtors or the Canadian Real Estate Association. These things are important that they get done. It's important that they're tracked. It's important that they're kept in, in chronological order and filed and date and time stamped. There's no way. I'm sorry, it just can't happen. So technology really needed to intervene here and be able to allow that process to be automated and to be systematized so that people know that it's a fair deal. Everybody's getting the right deal. The playing field is equal for everyone, and that transparency when it comes to especially the dollar amounts, right? The offer amounts. So if I'm going to put in an offer for $220,000 and then I see another offer come in for $230,000, its terms and conditions might be different, but I know that they're in the system, and I know that if I want to participate any further, I have to go above $230,000. That information is unbelievably valuable for a home buyer. If I want to participate to the end of this process, at least I know what the rules are. I'm not sitting there going, I don't know, what's highest and best? What does that mean? It's such a weird phrase. Give me your highest and best. Well, what does that mean? It's so ridiculous.
Subjective.
But we've been under this program like this for 100 years, it seems like.
So you're so right on that, and I'm glad you sort of you just sort of dropped that, because it's the piece that I want to pick up in the context of two things. Understanding a little bit about, because as you mentioned, this is a company that has originated in Australia and is now bringing the solution into North America. So I'd love to hear a little bit, first of all, about the Australian experience. And when I say the Australian experience, first of all, can you articulate, as kind of briefly as you can, the differences between how real estate's transacted in Australia versus the US or Canada? Because I think that's an important component. And then I have a follow-on question for you.
Oh, absolutely. I love to talk about the similarities and the differences, right?
Yeah.
So in Australia, there's two separate ways that transactions take place, the real estate transactions. And it's about split 50-50 between the states and of Australia. They have, I think it's 6 or 7 states that you kind of like your provinces in the United States states. So it's about half and half. Just like you would have the United States on the auction steps. I got 110, anybody give me 120, give me 130. I get that process takes place in half of it. And we have a product for that in Australia. We did not bring that product to North America, because in North America, that's not the way we do it. We do it more similarly to what they call private treaty, which is the other half of the equation in Australia. And that's offer and acceptance for us. It's very, very close, small differences. One of which is being that in Australia, there's only a real estate agent on the selling side. There's not a real estate agent on the buying side, which is very unique. And if there were to be an agent, if the buyer were to request an agent, the agent is actually presented to them by the selling agent. So the selling agent chooses the buying agent in Australia. It's very strange. Well, it's strange to us because that's not the way we do it. It's very, not strange to them. So we have this private treaty system over there, and that's where the product has really been building itself out for North American expansion, because it mirrors what our offer and acceptance is so closely. And the thing about Australia is the people of Australia, the consumers, the buyers in particular, are very similar to our buyers in North America. The things that they look for, the things that they want, they weren't getting transparency there either. The agents were actually kind of keeping that away from them over there for whatever reason they had. They were keeping it away from them. And so the adoption in Australia began very slowly. And I anticipate the same thing here in North America. So it was maybe 1% of the agents in Australia were adopting this technology, using it for the process of selling the homes. And then it started to grow a little bit, 1.5%, 2%, very slow. But what happened was the consumers started to fall in love with the process because they were getting that
Right.
feedback they needed. They were getting fed what they were asking for. And so the consumers were starting to migrate to the agents who were using this system to sell a house, and the other agents were losing out. So FOMO set in, and they started going, wait a minute, I just lost my listing to this other agent because they were using this platform. I should learn what it is. I should see it. So you start to see a little bit more of the agents using it. And then after about 3 years, or maybe closer to 4, in Australia, it hit the news. Well, our mainstream news that would be on ABC, NBC, CBS, not a local thing. I mean, it was a big time news story, and it talked all about what the process was and how it was friendly to the consumer. And they showed some videos of the buyers and sellers participating in the living room with their real estate agent sitting next to them on a screen, and the excitement that came with it, and the joy on the people's faces. And all of a sudden, boom, it went like a hockey stick. And now Australia is all on board. It's, Openn is the #1 product in Australia for a digital transaction like this. The stories are fantastic. There's all kinds of metrics and statistics about the sellers getting a higher price than they ever would have imagined, buyers being excited that they were able to stay in the process for as long as they could. Obviously, I mean, there's always going to be a financial constraint and a financial limit to what they can do, but at least they knew. They had the information, and they felt like when they left the process, they were treated fairly. And so the relationships with the real estate agents changed because of the product. They started to solidify, like, I get it now. I understand why you're important to the process and what you're bringing to the process. And so there's been nothing but success in Australia, and we're just so hopeful that we can duplicate that success here.
So, and again, great kind of segue, because and the reason to ask you about the similarities and the differences between the Australian and North American markets is, I'd love to know, because I think that is so your explanation in the context of how the agent-client relationship works in Australia is sort of fundamental to the overall success. And of course, some unpaid advertising never hurts either. When you have a big national news story run, that always seems to provide a little bit of a benefit. So that's awesome. But flipping to your view of sort of the North American landscape in particular, Eric, I'm really curious how you see sort of the evolution and the trends in particular that you're seeing, because our industry has evolved quite a bit during COVID in the context of, I would say, reception to not just new technology, because I'm a big advocate that technology really just enables a human experience, right? It's just there to facilitate something. What has really evolved, I think, is more the acceptance of doing things differently, or the acceptance that there's a potentially better way or a different way to do things. And to your point, this industry in North America is, the system is 100 years old in the context of how this particular part of the process has happened. So all of that to say, my next question of you is, what are the trends and the indicators that you may be seeing on the landscape that indicate that the industry is willing to do things a little bit differently and sort of begin to adopt this new process or this new way of doing the same process that Openn is bringing to the table?
Well, I think it all started with e-signing. Like DocuSign would have been the company that really brought that to light. Now there's many ways to e-sign. I think e-signing started it. And as you suggested in your comment, COVID pushed it over the edge because we couldn't do anything. You couldn't go anywhere, right? You couldn't go to an escrow office and sign a piece of paper or write a check and bring it in and things like that. So notarized started to become more popular. The companies who are producing products that allow you to send earnest money deposits and escrow money back and forth electronically, they started to tick up. Electronic title, RON, all these things, mortgage, all started to just push the envelope when it came to electronic transactions. And that's where we are now, and that's where we're going to be, and we're going to be there so much faster now because of this pandemic, which is, nobody wants a pandemic, but you got to look at some kind of a bright side. And our system, our industry, the real estate industry, should have been here 20 years ago. There's no reason why we shouldn't have been here so long ago, but we are so damn slow. And again, I told you I was a technology coach for 20 years. I was talking about things that people just didn't want to know about for 5 years. And it's like, no, you need to know now. Right. But we need to be able to reach a point where the entire transaction takes place with technology's assistance, not in technology and replacing the human, but assisting the human with technology in doing this. And it should be at some point in time on your tablet, on your phone, in the palm of your hand, because the largest population of buyers now is millennials and below. I can tell you right now, I'm a father of 6, grandfather of 3. My kids want to buy their house on their phone. And for the most part, they want to see it, but not necessarily step foot in it, right? There's a lot of ways you can see it now with technology. And we need to be there, and we need to be there for them so that we still remain relevant. Because without relevance, and if you have millennial children, or if you have anyone between the age of 18 and 35 as a child, you'll know their patience is about that fast.
Their attention is that fast, and then they have no patience on top
nope,
of it.
I'm moving on. Get away, gotta go. And so we have to be able to, as an industry, we have to be able to cater to that. The only way to do it is to use technology. So we're moving that way. We started it with e-signing. We moved that way slowly. We picked up speed because of COVID. Now we're at Mach speed when it comes to these things. And there's just no way you can turn back. And if you don't, I've been telling real estate agents and brokers this for 20 years. Educate yourself, learn something, read something. Don't just think that these things are gonna, kind of happen for you. You've got to be involved in it. You got to figure out what's going on, listen, and then make your own decision. But I'm going to tell you, it's good. The technology will roll over you if you don't start to educate yourself and understand it. And all that's out there. It's all out there.
Yeah, and I think, this industry for a long time has had the conversation around disruption, right? What's going to be the big disruptor? And I think we could probably, you and I, between the two of us, can pontificate on this all day and pull out the examples. But at the end of the day, the only thing that gets disrupted are the people that don't choose to move along the spectrum with everyone else. And it is about educating and becoming informed and being a part of the conversation. And, what I love about, what you guys are doing and what so many of the other innovators in the space are doing is really taking what has been tried and true and really matching it with where the consuming public is. Because to your point, and I'll go back to my favorite example, my favorite technology example is this. The MLS Listing Catalog back in the day before there was internet was actually a technology, right?
Yeah,
it was a technology. It wasn't digitally run, but that was the technology of the day, right? The axe and the pick back in the day was also the technology of the day.
Technology.
Right, exactly. And so the point is, if you think about it in that context, you've always had to adopt or adapt a new tool to help you do your business, right? And what I love about what you're doing, and again, so many of the other companies that we have the benefit to work with, is really just taking that tried and true process that this industry has evolved, has tested, and has, it is kind of that de facto accepted way of doing of conducting a real estate transaction, and just making it simpler, making it more efficient, making it more transparent, to your point. And I think that's, that's really super exciting. And I think is going to have a transformative impact. But before we get there, where do you think the biggest challenges lie? So where are you cautious, but also where are you optimistically cautious about your entrance into the North American market and some of the hurdles you may have to face?
I think we touched on it earlier, and I gave the example that in Australia, it happened there and it's going to happen here. And that's the I don't want to say the attitude, because that seems negative. It's the outlook of the current real estate agent and broker into the system. And there's a belief that by hiding certain things, the transaction has its best outcome. And I don't think that's the case. But we're going to have to get through that. We're going to have to get through a lot of people saying, we don't want the consumer to have this transparency. We've done it without it for so long that it's a comfort level for us right now. But it's just not true anymore. It's just like everything else in our lives. We found out that things change, people change, and we have to look at who that largest purchasing group is. It's not baby boomers anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just not. It's a much younger crowd, and they're not putting up with this stuff. And they will migrate to technologies that allow them to have those things they need. And sometimes those technologies might not involve the professional. So we have a real choice. It's a very difficult moment. I mean, there's technologies out there around digital ledger and blockchain, and the use of cryptocurrencies that are really picking up steam. And those young generations love them. And you can see what happens when places like, stuffy old banks start to push against cryptocurrency. It doesn't stop the people who want to use cryptocurrencies. It just makes them, do it somewhere else. So It's going to be the same thing for our industry. Is we're going to push the consumer away if we don't listen to what they're saying, and we're going to push them into a peer-to-peer transaction versus a transaction that uses the professional at the heart of it, which it should be, because it's a very large transaction. In most cases, the largest one you'll have in your life. And just like anything else, I'm not going into court and sit in front of a judge without a lawyer, right? I'm not going to diagnose myself as having an illness without a doctor. And you shouldn't really get involved in a transaction for a home without a professional by your side. But if we don't give that group of buyers what they want and what they're demanding, they'll go someplace else and they'll go to a peer-to-peer transaction. And we don't want that. It's not right for the industry. It's not right for the consumer. What's right is that we listen and we get involved and we start using these technologies to assist us in doing our jobs.
Love it. I love that. Eric, I really enjoyed this. I think, what you guys are doing again is so on point for this moment in time in the industry. I think there's never been a better time to engage in this conversation and introduce some of these new ways of doing business. All the best to you, because I know it doesn't come without its challenges. We have, we still have a number of, legacy players in the space, but, to their credit, it's really, they were the innovators at one point too. And so, everything that goes around comes around, and I'm excited to see sort of where this next wave takes you. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like to share before we say goodbye today? We didn't touch on the relevance of the timing right now. We talked a little bit about it, but there's also a lot of things going on in the United States and Canada with the Department of Justice in the U.S. around consumer advocacy. And what we're talking about now, this transparency, it's going to be pushed from a lot different, from a higher level than it has been in the past. And we need to pay attention to that, because the Department of Justice is not going to back off
of the National Association of Realtors or the industry itself. They want the consumer protected, and things like technologies like Openn and the other processes that make this transaction more transparent are going to be the solution that they're looking for and they're hoping to achieve. So, and I know that you've got your own political pressure up there in Canada as well when it comes to the transparency issue, the consumer advocacy, and doing what's right, really. And that could be that's a whole different podcast, right? That could be its own 30 minutes when it comes to that. But the timing, not only is it right technologically, but it's right by the way of what we're seeing from government pressure from both
political
countries.
environment. I think you've just given us a reason to expand the aperture of this podcast, because you're so right. So much of where real estate, technology, and capital intersect are kind of on that foundation of what the political environment looks like. And, often, and to your point, I mean, you don't have to look much further than you mentioned DocuSign and Notarize. I mean, really, they had great solutions and the industry and the consuming public demanded it. But really, until the legislators got the pen out and changed some things, really, that's what created the pathway. And I think that, it's another huge opportunity we have as part of this industry to have the benefit of sort of those three components, those three pillars of what helps motivate legislators to make the right decisions on the behalf of the consumer, right? Real estate is a large capital asset, it's a large asset class. Technology is, a facilitating vehicle. And, when you have capital that needs to be deployed into an economy, then I think all of those things are helpful in motivating legislators. And I know we're grateful for all the work that NAR does around this piece, but how NAR also partners with technology to forward some of those advocacy components. So such a good point, Eric, in the context of, how the political environment creates timing and opportunity as well. And
No doubt.
Well said.
And I could sit here and talk about Openn forever. I just love doing this stuff. This is so much fun.
Oh, I'm so glad that you're having fun. I'm so glad that we get to be on this journey with you. How do people find you? If anybody wants to learn more about Openn, how do they find you? How do they get in touch?
They can always email me, eric.bryant, like Kobe, at openn.com. So OPENN, that's two N's. So eric.bryant@openn.com. They can also reach out on LinkedIn and just look for the RE coach.
Perfect.
And you'll find me on Twitter. I'm the RE coach. On Instagram, I'm the real estate coach. So you can find me on any of those venues. And like I said, email or whatever it might be. So
all right. And we'll have
Openn.
And we'll have all that content in the show notes as well. But Eric, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, for sharing your thoughts, and best of luck to you and the rest of your team.
The pleasure's been mine. I can't wait to do it again.
All right. Take care.
See ya.